Welcome to the Q&A for Living, this extraordinary film that we all just had the pleasure of watching. And I can't imagine that there is a dry eye in the house. And tonight we have the pleasure of the producer, Stephen Woolley, joining us actually once again and to speak to the film club after he generously gave us his time to speak about Mothering Sunday, which many of you have seen. So Stephen, in addition to wanting to have an interesting chat, I'm hoping that I'll be able to hold it together and not get weepy again, thinking and talking about this film. So congratulations and thank you for making this this beautiful.
I have a real problem watching this movie as well. So please don't feel that you should hold back the tears, because I just came back from Tokyo, where we showed it to a packed house as the closing night of the Tokyo Film Festival. And I thought, I really want to see the film with a Japanese audience, which is why I went, to see how they responded. And I have to say, I've seen the film possibly 100, maybe even more times, in all sorts of circumstances, from San Sebastian to Telluride, to Sundance, to Toronto, to London, to Venice. And I was weeping in the last 30 minutes of the movie, and how ridiculous and stupid is that? But the film isn't sentimental. It isn't like It's a Wonderful Life, which kind of digs deep to get you crying. It just is the accumulation of understanding Bill as Bill's character Williams, and the situation that he's in, and the gentle sacrifice he makes to try and do something that will give him that release at the end of his life. And it's just, I find Ishiguro's writing of that so moving, and Oliver Hermanus's direction so understated, that it just creeps, literally, as Bill's character William says in the pub, it creeps up on you.
Yeah.
And you don't realize it. And suddenly, when I see it with a new audience, as if I had seen it here today with you, I see it through their eyes, and it creeps up on me again. And I realize what people must be thinking when they see Bill on the swing, or when they listen to him talking in the bar to Amy, or when he is standing there begging Sir James. And they're so moving, those moments, because they're so understated, and there's really not a huge amount of dialogue. And I think it's one of the great things about working on this film with someone like Ishiguro. When he first came to me with the idea of making Akira, we had spent some time talking about Japanese cinema and British cinema. We're both big fans of Ozu and 𝙀𝙊𝙀𝙀𝙀, who are great Japanese filmmakers, as well as Kurosawa, of course, but also of Ealing films and Basil Dearden films and movies that were made in the 50s in the UK. And both films have, both those genres of films and both nationalities have a fixation on stoicism and burying emotion, which British people are very good at, and Japanese people are very good at, which is, we're not going to get too excited or too depressed, and we'll be very polite about it. And it's something that I think haunts me a little bit as well. I'm one of those people who never gets that excited and never gets that down, which is what makes me keep making movies, which is that it's never that great. But you know what? It's not that bad. We can carry on.
That's very funny.
It was never meant, we never wanted to do a sort of frame-by-frame remake. What we wanted to do, or what Ishiguro wanted to do, was to reimagine what it would be like in that situation in London, which had a very similar history to what happened in Tokyo, where Tokyo was suffering appallingly from the bombing towards the end of the war, and London, of course, was suffering appallingly from the Blitz. And 7 years later, in 1952, nothing much had been done. London was the same. And people instead of demonstrating, instead of going onto the streets and saying, you know, what is going on, like the three women in both films,
Yes.
they were sort of just accepting it,
Passive.
accepting, oh, things weren't being repaired, and oh, rationing is still happening. And it was a kind of weird parallel. And finally, people started to break and say, actually, you know what, things really have to be done. And that parallel is very strong with Japanese and British society, an actor.
Right.
But with Living, we started off with the idea, or Ishiguro started off with the idea. He came to me through a dinner we had.
Yeah, I read that there was a very specific genesis of the this
he
project.
said, he said, Bill and I should star in a remake of 𝙀𝙀𝙀𝙀. And I watched 𝙀𝙀𝙀𝙀 again. I hadn't seen it since I was a teenager. And I agreed 100% Bill and I should star. And I said to Ishiguro, and you should write it. And he said, oh, I'm not very good at scripts. And I said, no. You understand this. You should write this.
Right.
And he said, oh, I don't have time. And I pushed him because I knew that he would be the only person who could recognize these things.
I really think you're absolutely right about that. Not only is he such an exceptional writer, he is a British Japanese person, you know. Exactly. And like, could you possibly dream up a more compelling bridge between the two cultures and the original material and what was, you know, the life that was breathed into it with this sense, you know.
But it is the man who wrote Remains of the Day, you know, that's it is very moving, the film, because you believe whilst you're watching it that this boring grey character, really, what can he do?
Yeah,
what is
the zombie.
Yeah, Mr. Zombie. And that's our biggest fear, isn't it? That we all become zombies. Yeah. And we can't really break out of the world that we've chosen for ourselves. And that world is slightly false. And being a gentleman, after all, isn't good enough. You know, having the bowler hat and the umbrella and the case, it's just, and the wonderful suit, it's just not enough. And that's kind of the lasting thing. If people ask you, what do you want people to take away from a film? I hope people take away from this movie that they can actually wake up the next day and go, you know, I could change. I could do this that I've been thinking about doing, or I could push that along a little more.
And you know, it's interesting to see him, you know, try different things on for size. You know, he tries the, you know, the sort of the hedonistic route briefly, and it's obviously an awkward fit at best, and he doesn't even find it particularly fulfilling, but it just absolutely, and here's where I'm going to get teary, it absolutely breaks my heart that the thing that he ends up, you know, deciding to do as his parting gesture, so to speak, is a playground. You know, that it's this hard luck project that is absolutely like pushing a boulder up a steep hill, but he will, you know, he won't, you know, he won't take no for an answer. And it's just such a beautiful, simple, impactful thing. It's just heartbreaking. And it's
actually, you know, the other hard thing about this movie was that the Kurosawa estate had been given lots and lots of money by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks years ago to make this film. So when I first inquired, and that's just a laugh, because when I was persuading Ishiguro to write it, I didn't have the rights. All I had was a DVD of the film, which I watched. So I mean, I had no right to ask him to write the script.
Right.
The rights on the film. But when I inquired with the Kurosawa estate, they were very dismissive because they asked for all the money that they had previously been promised from a Hollywood studio,
right,
for a version that would have been you know, $100 million version probably.
Right.
But I didn't have that, so that was quite difficult until I mentioned Ishiguro's name, and then they sort of did a double take and came back to me and said, oh my gosh, have you really got Ishiguro? And I said, yes, he's very keen. So for Japan, I think the idea of Kurosawa and Ishiguro was
Right.
was crazy. Like, oh, probably two of the most famous artists to emerge from Japan in the last 100 years.
Yes.
But then they didn't believe me that I had 𝙀𝙬 so I had to write a letter. 𝙀𝙬 had to send a letter to say he was 𝙀𝙬. And then as we
That's
were
so
closing
funny.
the deal,
Did they think you were bluffing?
yeah, I think they did. And then as we were closing the deal, they said, we still don't believe it's 𝙀𝙬. So 𝙀𝙬 had to do a video of himself saying, hello, I am 𝙀𝙀. This is what I'd like to do, because they just couldn't believe that this was actually the case, that 𝙀𝙀 was going to write it. And they were delighted with the film, as you can imagine. We had a great screening in Tokyo. I'm sure that the people that have watched your movies that you present are extremely well educated in terms of cinema, because that's partly what you're doing, is showing great. But you know, what we're finding is young people really like the movie, even though the film is quite slow paced, and that's the thing that people were attracted to, rather than pushing against it.
Right.
You know, there is, you know, we watch movies now which are sometimes 2, 3, 3.5 hours long, and yet they feel like they're going at 100 miles an hour, like you're on a speeding train.
Yes.
You can't, and so they feel, for me, often even longer, because they're so heavily cut, so you're sort of wishing around all the time, and they get tiring and boring. And what's interesting about this film is that it's edited in a way that's quite in keeping with the kind of scripts and the kind of story that you're watching, which is all about nuance and detail. And so you think, oh, it's an hour and 42 minutes or whatever it is, and that it should be longer, but it feels very short. We just opened the film at the weekend in the UK, and it's been a big hit here.
Congratulations.
Yeah, no, great. And we also got 9 BIFA nominations on Friday, which is
fantastic.
Great. British Independent Film Awards.
It will be a crime if 𝙀𝙀 is not nominated for an Academy Award, I have to say.
It would be lovely if he were, and he deserves it, and so does 𝙀𝙀 for his script.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure, that as well, yeah.
So I think people are evaluating their way of thinking, and I hope this helps in a tiny way. I mean, films are just films. The world is much bigger than a movie, but at least with a movie you might, you know, it's nice if people question a few things.
Yeah, no, I think this film will resonate and get people thinking in the way that, you know, probably Kurosawa intended, you know, nearly 70 years ago, that you and this exceptional team who made this beautiful, beautiful moving film intended. I think it will leave its mark, even though it's just a film. I hear you, but I think it's really extraordinary. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this film. I am so grateful.
Anytime. Great to see you,
and to chat, and thank you for making it. Again, thank you for making this amazing film. So, just so great to see you as always. All right, and you know, sending good vibes for a great opening here, which I think I can't imagine how it happens otherwise. All right, thank you so much.
I think it's December 23.
Yes, it is December 23rd. So we're getting quite a special early look at it. So, all right, thank you so much.
Good.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.